Welcome to Crime on Caffeine. I'm your host, Erica.
And I'm your host, Allison. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. Okay, today we be sipping on a coffee I found on Amazon. And honestly, thank goodness, because we were running out of ideas here. This is the La Colombe Workshop Coffees in the medium roast, and it has like a little skelly on it, and it says R.I.P. And who was the guy that flew the kite? There's like the kite and then the lightning. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Edison?
Yes. There's a skelly of Thomas Edison on there, and he's drinking a cup of coffee. I just love the description of the flavors too. Caramel cream, blackberry jam, and spice cake.
I love those flavors together.
I know, and honestly, La Colombe, I hope I'm saying that right. The first time I ever had it was in LA, and I thought I had never heard of it before, so then I thought I was just like so cool drinking these like La Colombe coffees, and lo and behold, they're very widely available and very widely loved. So I am not special, and neither is I.
Hey, I didn't know about it before we had this, so you're cool to me.
You're right. Thank you so much. But yes, everybody should get their hands on this. I didn't put pumpkin creamer in it because the blackberry jam was throwing me off. So I just did vanilla because I felt like that was going to be the best option there. And it tastes good. Let me tell you what.
I think I'm over pumpkin. I've already changed my home fragrance to pine to get ready for Christmas.
You're over pumpkin.
I'm so over pumpkin.
There's no way.
We've been having pumpkin stuff since like August.
Okay, well, I haven't.
I don't know about that.
I haven't. I cheated a little bit, and like at the end of September, I went in a little bit. But October is really the first month that I went full pump.
Full pump. I don't know. I've moved on.
Okay,
I'm full pine.
Welcome to the pine. I'm still in the pump. I went into Home Goods the other day, and it's fully transitioned into Christmas already.
Yeah, I think the calendar in my head is like a retail calendar, honestly.
Well, that's because we advertise for retail.
That's true.
So I have a true crime update, and I'm sure this is what you've all been waiting for. So first, I wanted to do a true crime update on Jelani Day, just to refresh everybody's memory. He was the 25-year-old college student that went missing in August. He was studying to be a doctor at Illinois State University. He was last seen on August 24th at the campus in Bloomington, Illinois. His parents reported him missing on August 25th, so just a day later. His car was found 2 days after that in Peru, Illinois. His body was found dead floating in the Illinois River on September 4th. His body wasn't identified until multiple weeks later by the coroner, and they said recently that the cause of death was drowning. How do you feel about that?
So, did they specifically say drowning on his own, at his own fault? Like he drowned, or like someone caused him to drown, or like someone threw him in the river and he drowned because it was moving really fast? I don't know, because I read he was like a swimmer, wasn't he?
Yes, I also read that he was a swimmer. Apparently, the family still suspects foul play, but there has not been ruled any kind of foul play. His belongings were scattered, and it was just a really weird crime scene, I guess you would call it, for this to be, he just drowned.
Yeah, I don't understand, because it's like, why did he go to that place in the first place? And like, why were all of his things there, and the whole license plate thing? And I just like, how would he have just ended up in the river and drowned on his own doing?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Literally, the coroner said that there was no evidence of intoxication or injury. In the forensic autopsy, there were no signs of assault, altercation, strangulation. So it just remains unknown of how he ended up in the river, but the cause of death was drowning. The coroner said drowning is considered a diagnosis of exclusion with supporting investigation circumstances when the person is found dead in a body of water. So there's really no we've got nothing else, guys. His family is still fighting. His fraternity brothers are still fighting to get the FBI to look a little bit further into this because it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Not at all. And his poor mother.
Yeah, I feel really terrible. Apparently they did have some kind of burial recently in the past few days. So I just want them to get answers and heal in some kind of way.
Me too.
Yeah. The other true crime update we have for you guys is Brian Laundrie. Just a little bit of background to update you guys on who Mr. Brian Laundrie is. He was the main suspect in the Gabby Petito murder. He returned home to his parents' house on September 1st without her. Her family reported her missing 10 days later. Brian then was reported missing on September 17th, and his parents said that the last time they saw him was the 13th, and then Gabby Petito's remains were found in the Teton National Forest on September 19th. So just 2 days after Brian Laundrie had gone missing, her body was found. So basically they've been looking for Brian Laundrie since September 13th, so over a month now, and the FBI and law enforcement found a partial skeletal remain in the, oh gosh, I have such a hard time saying this, the Mayakachi Creek Environmental Park. And they also found a backpack and other personal items that were said to belong to Brian Laundrie, and that was on October 20th. I find it very strange that, just a few days after they reopened the park, some things had been found.
Literally, wasn't it it was right when they opened? They were there at 7 a.m.
I think it was the next day. Yeah, it was the next day they found personal belongings, which, I'm sorry, but you had been searching the park for over a month, and you had divers, you had dogs, you had thermo map things, you had everything, and you found nothing. But the day after the park opens, all this stuff arises.
Yeah, which just so happened to be the first day that the parents actually helped too, which is interesting. I'm not going to assume or speculate or whatever. I want to hear what happens, but it's just very, very interesting to me how this is all unraveling.
Yeah, I actually saw, and of course I'm saying TikTok like it's a reputable source, but this was crazy. So a girl actually went in to search for things herself. I think I sent you this this morning. She found Gabby Petito's freaking water bottle.
I saw that.
And she told the cops, and they were like, oh, okay, well, we don't need it.
That was the same girl who found that rope that was a swing at one point, they said, but I don't know.
So apparently the area where they found all this stuff had previously been underwater, and that is why now they were finding it. The following day after they found everything, they compared dental records and confirmed that the partial skeletal remains were that of Brian Laundrie. The initial autopsy after they recovered the remains was on October 20th, and the results came back inconclusive. So then they were sent to a forensic anthropologist, and apparently that's going to take about 2 or 3 weeks for us to get some kind of answer on the forensic anthropologist's analysis. Apparently how that works is they conduct DNA tests and look for any signs of weapon evidence to help determine how a person died. Whether the forensic anthropologist will be able to determine the death of this is unclear as of right now. So, damn, I don't know. I have a lot of theories just flurrying around in my head. I think I've just become crazy about this case, and now I just am some kind of conspiracy theorist, and I'm like, he's alive. I'm like, those aren't his remains.
That would be so crazy if he was alive.
I do sound crazy, but first of all, bodies can't decompose to a skeletal unit that quickly. He's only missing for a month. Maybe a little over a month. Even if he was underwater, that actually preserves your body longer. And they said that he was underwater, but when you die, your body fills up with gas and you float. So I don't get it.
My only like devil's advocate reasoning for that would be if like birds or gators got to his remains. Like that would be.
Aren't alligators just like pigs? Like they can digest bones?
Maybe they were bonitarian.
Bonitarian alligators? Riddle me that. I don't know. I'm just crazy and I think of all these things in my head.
I know. I agree. Like there's so many like theories out there and stuff, and it's kind of hard to want to know all the information, but still like we want to respect the Petito family.
Yeah, I do want to respect everybody in the situation, but my crazy ass just was
everybody except for Brian Laundrie.
He's a narcissist and he never killed himself and he's alive and living in Norway.
Hey, well, if we've learned anything from this B.T.K. case, we know that sometimes these people will deter from the norm.
True. It do be happening.
It do.
But that's all I got for you guys. So let's get on with the case.
No more distractions. I've been waiting for so long to do this case, so I'm really excited.
Yes.
The last spooky case for October is, drumroll.
I tried.
Dennis Rader, a.k.a. the B.T.K.
Ugh. I hate him.
I think we should just jump right into it. Dennis Lynn Rader. Yes, that is his name. Makes me feel a lot better.
Denny Lynn.
Who he is as a person. Denny Lynn. Good old Denny Lynn. He was born on March 9th, 1945 to Dorothea May and William Elvin Rader. He was born in Kansas. Some sources say Columbus, Kansas. Some say Pittsburgh, Kansas. Whatever, he was born in Kansas. Either way, he ended up moving to Wichita, so that's where he grew up. He was the oldest of 4 boys.
Oh my God. My nickname in 5th grade at YMCA camp was Wichita.
Why?
My counselor just kept calling me Wichita. I don't know.
What if he was secretly making fun of you?
Then I had no freaking clue. Because I was like, I embraced it. I was like, yeah, I'm Wichita.
His father was in the Marines, and then he went to work for like a gas electric company. Dennis's friends said that his father could be strict at sometimes, stubborn, but it wasn't like he didn't have like an abusive father. His father was never cruel towards him, they said. That's the weird thing about Dennis Rader. I'm not calling him BTK. Dennis Rader did not come from a messed up childhood. He's one of those very, very rare cases where he had a seemingly normal upbringing. It was just him on the inside that was messed up for no reason. Like I said, as a child, he was described as being very normal. He was a Boy Scout. He went to church. He participated in youth group, just totally normal. He was an average student. He was reportedly withdrawn in school. He was described as quiet, polite. People said that he wasn't really one to joke around. He was more like serious and very focused, which is weird because he didn't do well in school. So like, what the hell were you focused on? He did start to focus on some things. This is where it starts to happen.
Things start going awry.
He admitted that as a child, he had already started fantasizing about, quote, bondage, control, and torture. And as he got older, he started fantasizing about tying girls up. He also admitted that, trigger warning, oh my gosh, I just want to put a really big trigger warning at the beginning of this episode. This episode is not like my normal episodes, so if you are someone who listens to these episodes and you don't like murders or anything gruesome or any kind of sexual assault, things like that, please, it's okay if you don't listen. Talking to my family, talking to Nate's family, just anyone who doesn't want to hear those things. I know I usually do like missing people and like mysterious things, but this is not that. This is all the bad things, all the gross things. So please, trigger warning. Thank you. So anyway, back to what I was saying, a mini trigger warning, but he also admitted that he hanged and killed cats and dogs when he was a child. So that was like his little experimentation. We always see that they start with animals.
It's a clear sign.
Yeah, so his MO from the start to finish is the same, never changes. He tried semesters at 2 different colleges and ended up joining the Air Force for 4 years. And then he returned to Wichita in 1970. He was 25 at this point. On May 22nd, 1971, Dennis married Paula Dietz. They had 2 children, Brian and Carrie. She and Dennis had attended the same high school, and she was a bookkeeper, and he was working at a supermarket before getting a job with a camping supply manufacturer in 1972. The following year, he got a job with an airplane manufacturer, and he was taking classes at Butler Community College, and he ended up earning his associate's degree in electronics. From there, he went on to attend Wichita State, and he took night classes for about 6 years before he was able to obtain his degree because he was like working during the day, going to school at night. He actually did horribly in school. He was like a CD student. It was presumed that he might have had a learning disability, so that kind of sucked. But this is funny. Guess what his degree was in?
Oh, God, what?
Criminal justice.
Stop it. Just, you playing games with me.
Too funny. Too funny.
Too much.
So later that year, he was let go by his job. He became super depressed, withdrawn. He had hella time on his hands. And then in November of 73, he started a new job with ADT Security and was an installation manager. This is important.
Okay.
So obviously there was like a big gap there. And he had all that time before he got this new job where he was down, depressed, whatever. So he did what he called trolling. So this is when he would just walk around neighborhoods and college campuses, and he would basically just watch women and fantasize about them, stalk them, like sit outside of their houses, watch their routines, and like fantasize about what he always fantasized about, like tying them up. Mm-hmm. So really creepy. And it's starting to escalate a little bit. But then he gets this job, so less time on his hands, not doing as much trolling.
Yeah.
But he did begin to watch a Hispanic family named the Oteros. They moved into the same neighborhood that he and his family lived in. And he was trolling, and he just like studied them, memorized all of their patterns, their habits, their schedules, everything. Like he knew when they would come and go. He knew all the members of the family, who would be where when. So from there, he began to plan. So between 7 and 8 a.m. on January 15th, 1974, Dennis snuck behind the back of the Otero's house and cut the phone lines. He entered the home through the back door, and he was surprised to see the entire family present because, he spent all that time studying them and he knew their routines. And then he saw they were all fucking there, and he was like, oh, shit. I'm going to point this out now because I will make several comments. He might have done a lot of bad things, very scary. He is so stupid and just like, I understand narcissistic serial killers, like Ted Bundy was so full of himself and whatnot, but like he wasn't cringy about it. Like Dennis Rader thought he was at that level. No, sorry, dude. Like I said, entire family was there. So the mom and dad, Joseph and Julie Otero, and then 2 of their children, Joseph, who was 9, and then Josephine, who was 11. So Dennis held a gun to Joe and ordered him to take the dog in the backyard. I guess they had like a scary looking dog, and he was like, oh, hell no, get him out of here. He told the family that he was wanted by the police and he was on the run. And he was like, give me food, give me money, and give me a car so that I can get the hell out of here. So he forced everyone to lie down so that he could tie them up, and then he forced them into the bedroom. So like at first he was making it look like he needed to like tie them up so that he could escape or whatever. So they totally complied with it because they were like, okay, he's just trying to rob us. Let's listen to him and then he won't hurt us. But that wasn't the case, unfortunately. Okay. So he first placed a bag over Joe's head and strangled him around the neck with a cord. And then he tried to strangle Julie with his bare hands, but he was having a very difficult time. So I want to point out that in order for her to actually die by strangulation from his bare hands, he would literally have to be sitting there applying the correct amount of pressure, which is more than you would think, I feel like, 4 to 5 minutes straight. So he would have to keep that same constant pressure or more pressure, which is probably a lot of pressure. I don't really know how much, but for that long, like 5 minutes is a long time. And I don't think he realized this. And that's what makes strangulation so disgusting and terrifying, is just because of how intimate it is. Oftentimes that's what you see in domestic violence cases or just like any relationships, people that they know, often strangulation, just because it's so intimate. That's often the case. But yeah, so it took him like a few different tries to finally get it to work. So I don't really know how long in total that took him, but I would assume quite a while. So then he moved on to the children. He murdered Joey by suffocating him with a bag, and apparently this is like so fucked up. Not that the other stuff isn't, but like this just makes me want to throw up. But apparently he had like brought a chair in so that he could sit down and like wait for him to die. Just sit there and like watch.
Good. That's good.
Josephine was hanged in the basement around a pipe. She was partially naked, but she was not sexually assaulted, though there was semen found on the pipe behind her, so that you can assume from there that he, you know, did his thing to her being
dead. Yeah,
hanged.
that's good.
Yeah. So after these horrific murders, he cleaned up, which he called this the right-hand rule, because after you're done, you go to every room in the house and pick everything up. That's what he says.
I hate him.
So he took with him a watch and a radio. He stole their car, almost getting into an accident while backing out of the driveway. See, this is why no matter how scary it sounds, this dude himself just was, I can't. Just wait, because it gets better with his stupidity. So he's backing out, drives to a nearby supermarket, and throws the keys on the roof, just so that nobody can find them, whatever.
Okay.
Please, okay, because you're gonna laugh. So after he did this, his plan was like then to go to his car, drive home, nothing happened. He realized that he left the knife there. But he threw the keys on the roof, so he can't like drive their car back. So he would have to take his own car, drive back to their house, get the knife, and leave. He truly did not think he was going to get caught. And I think it's like a mix of being so fucking stupid and so narcissistic. It's crazy. Oh. But he also didn't know that the family had 3 other kids, a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 13-year-old. So they came home from school later that day, and they found their family like that.
It's so terrible. So
terrible.
I feel so bad. That's so bad.
So this is the start to the wrath of B.T.K. 3 months later, he took his second victim, 21-year-old Catherine Bray. So he broke into her home in the morning, and he just like chilled and waited there until she came home, which wasn't until later that afternoon, like 2 o'clock. But she came home with her 19-year-old brother, Kevin, which he definitely wasn't expecting. So he used like the same method that he did with the Oteros, and he forced them at gunpoint to 2 separate bedrooms this time. He first forced Kevin to tie his sister up, and then he moved him to a different room. And he told him the same thing. I don't want to hurt you. Like, I need money to get to New York. I'm on the run, blah, blah, blah. Somewhat gained their trust. Keep them from fearing him. He found a stocking in the house and attempted to strangle Kevin with it, but just like the first time, he was failing at it again. And Kevin was able to get loose, and he grabbed Dennis's gun. So he pulled the trigger 2 times, but it didn't fire, unfortunately. Imagine if it just ended there.
I mean, that would be best case scenario, honestly.
I know. Episode will be over.
And thank you for listening.
But unfortunately, it didn't fire. Dennis was able to get the gun away from him, and he ended up shooting Kevin in the head 2 or 3 times. So he started to panic, and he immediately went to the room that Catherine was in. But let me tell you, Kevin wasn't dead. He was just playing dead. So this is kind of when he goes off the rails, because I think that when something doesn't go according to his plan, I think it shakes him up so much. So he literally just started stabbing Catherine, and that's how he killed her, and then he fled.
Oh my God.
So like he didn't do his little cleanup. He didn't do any of his normal routine. I think he was so thrown off by what happened. So Kevin ran out of the house. He found help, take him to the hospital. He ended up surviving. So in the future, he ends up suing Dennis for $75,000. Which I'm pretty sure like all the victims' families, ma'am, this is 1972.
I'm saying I'd be like Dr. Evil. I need $1 million.
Me talking as if I don't have $10 in my bank account right now.
Me too.
As if I'm not going to overdraft tomorrow.
I'm like, okay, so we rich, huh? We got $30 today.
So in October of that year, a man who worked for the Wichita Eagle newspaper told police that someone called the newspaper to tell them that there was a letter hidden in an engineering book at the Wichita Public Library. So the police went and they found the letter, and in the letter was details about the Otero murders. And it was very poorly written with a ton of grammatical and spelling errors, but it was very clear that this person was telling the truth because of the details they provided, like only the person who committed the crime would know. So I'm gonna read you the letter.
Oh, goodness.
Those 3 dude you have in custody are just talking to get publicity. They know nothing at all. I did it by myself and with no one's help. One's help is one word, by the way. So then he just goes into detail about describing like the Otero crime scene, like body positions, conditions, everything. After that, he says, I'm sorry this happened to the society, ... It hard to control myself. You probably call me, quote, psychotic with sexual perversion hang up, unquote. It's so weird how like he was able to spell psychotic with sexual perversion, but like it hard to control myself. Like,
yeah, this is so confusing.
He said, where this monster enter my brain, I will never know, but it here to stay. How does one cure himself? If you ask for help, that you have killed 4 people, they will laugh or hit the panic button and call the cops. I can't stop it, so the monster goes on and hurt me as wall as society. Society can be thankful to else that there are ways for people like me to relieve myself at time by daydreams of some victim being tortured and being mine. It a big complicated game, my friend, of the monster playing. I can't even say this without laughing. It a big complicated game. I'm sorry, I'm like almost in tears.
In a big complicated. I'm sorry. I should not be laughing. I really shouldn't.
It a bit.
Stop. It's too early for this shit.
It a big complicated game, my friend, of the monster play, putting victims' number down. Follow them, checking up on them, waiting in the dark, waiting. ... The pressure is great, and I don't even know how to read this. Sumt-times. So that's SOMT-times. Sometimes he run the game to his liking. Maybe you can stop him. I can't. He has already chosen his next victim or victims. I don't know who they are yet. The next day after I read the paper, I will know, but it too late. Good luck hunting. Yours truly, guiltily. P.S. Since sex criminals do not change their MO or by nature cannot do so, I will not change mine. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, B.T.K. You see he at it again. They will be on the next victim.
I have no words. He named himself.
Yeah, he did name himself, and that is so on par with him as a person and his dichotomy. Like, we'll obviously get into all that, but yeah, you can see why he was a CD student in college. Also notice how confident and accurate he was on the fact that sexual offenders don't change their MO. That criminal justice degree.
I was just about to say, it's weird because he clearly can't form functional sentences, but all of the things he would have learned in school, psychopath, sexual tendencies, all of these things he can clearly articulate, which is so strange.
Well, and I'm wondering if it's because obviously, spoiler alert, he's narcissistic, huge ego, thinks so highly of himself for reasons I'm totally unaware of. So I'm wondering if because he felt like he was learning about himself, that he was so interested in it, and that's why he remembers it, because he was learning those things, and he's like, that's me. And they don't know, but that's me.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's very clear that he has an untreated learning disability. But we will have, all the letters and everything on the website. when it's updated so you guys can read it yourselves. Take a gander and have a laugh.
Have a giggle like we did.
So in like 74, 75, Rader had a steady job. He was going to school, and this is when he and Paula had their first child. So for the next 2 years following, he claims that he was so busy that he didn't have time to commit any other murders. He said during this period of cooling off, he still was trolling for victims. So he was watching people, planning, but he wasn't committing any murders. So I just want to note that this is his first cooling off period. There will be more. So then in March of 1977, he was back. And he had sought out 2 women to attack, but when he entered their homes, they weren't present. He was very bold this time around. Definitely, you can see that he gets bolder and bolder. So he walked around the neighborhood on foot this time, not even in his car or anything, and he was pretending to be a cop. And so he walked up to a 5-year-old boy, and he showed him a picture of his wife, Paula. And he was like, have you seen her? Like, I don't know where she is. And the boy said no. And Dennis followed him to his house. He knocked on the door, and it wasn't just the boy. He had 2 siblings. So all 3 of the children just like let him in. They were 4, 5, and 8 years old. Dennis went into the living room and he shut the blinds. He turned the TV off. And then the mom, 26-year-old Shirley Vian, some sources say she was 25, some say 26. She comes out in a bathrobe and she's like, what the hell is going on? Who are you? Why are you... what? So at gunpoint, he forces the kids into the bathroom and he locks them in there. And then he holds the gun up to Shirley and he forces her into the bedroom, does his normal thing. He ties her up. He strangles her with a cord. He leaves the kids in the bathroom and flees. He also stupidly leaves semen on her underwear that police found. He actually later admitted that the phone rang, so he bugged out and ran. Otherwise, he would have killed the children too. So that's why they were still left in the bathroom. And see, these things that don't go according to plan for him really throw him off.
Yeah.
And it switches up his MO. Because obviously the Oteros, he has no problem with killing children. So in December of the same year, he found his next victim, 25-year-old Nancy Fox. Notice how he's like starting out with younger women. Mm-hmm. So he stalked her for days before making his move on December 8th, 1977. He cut the phone line, like he always does, and he went through an open window to get into her apartment and once again just like waited for her to come home. She wasn't there yet. She lived in a duplex, but at this time she had no neighbor. It was just her. When she did come home, he held her at gunpoint and told her that he had a sexual issue, so he needed to tie her up in order to rape her. And so she was obviously fucking so scared, and so she didn't resist because she thought he was going to kill her if she did. But he was making it sound like all he wanted to do was that. So she was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to listen. I want to live.
Yeah.
So he forced her to partially undress in the bathroom and then go over to the bedroom where he bound her to the bed. And he undressed and then just started confessing everything to her. Admitted to the previous murders, told her that she was the next victim, everything. So he strangled her to death. I'm sure by now you guys are getting like a sense of what his MO is. But once again, his dumbass left semen at the scene on her nightgown right next to her body.
I wonder why he did that. Like why he confessed.
He's stupid. He wants to talk about it so bad, and you will see that he wants to talk about it so bad. I mean, he wrote the letter and he wanted the police to find it. Like he wants people to know. He wants to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But he wants to keep doing it, so he doesn't want to get caught right now. The next morning, he drove his work van, once again, very bold, to a payphone, calls the police, and reports the murder of Nancy Fox that he just did. And the 911 call was played repeatedly on the news, but no one recognized his voice at all. In 1978, he was at it again writing. So this time he wrote a poem, and it was called Shirley Locks, based off of Curly Locks. He's such a dick, but he sent it to the Wichita Eagle again. The poem says, Shirley Locks, wilt thou be mine, which is based off of like the children's nursery rhyme or whatever, Curly Locks, obviously a reference to Shirley Vian. And he sent it to the Wichita Eagle, and nobody really understood what the hell it was. Nobody realized the significance, so they like didn't do anything. And so he was mad that he didn't get a reaction from them. So he contacted KAKE TV, which is just like a local news station in Kansas. So a second letter came in, and he sent it to both of them. It's a 2-pager, and it arrived Friday, February 10th. And he said, "How many people do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national attention?" He said he planned to kill again.
He just wants attention. He's just an attention hoe.
Yeah, he said, "I am compelled to kill by Factor X, the same factor that motivated Son of Sam in New York, Jack the Ripper in London, and the Hillside Strangler in Los Angeles. It seems senseless, but we cannot help it. There is no help, no cure except death or being caught and put away. A little paragraph in the newspaper would have been enough. After a thing like Fox, I come home and go about life like anyone else." And so in this letter, he's claiming responsibility for the Otero's murder again, Nancy Fox's, Shirley Vian's, and then another victim that he didn't name, which like they're assuming is Catherine Bright at this point.
Yeah.
The first letter that they got where he admits to all the crimes against the Oteros, they didn't release it to the public just because they wanted to keep it under wraps in the investigation. Yeah. But they went public with this letter when they realized that didn't fucking work. And so they were like, all right, let's try communicating with this dude through the media. There was also another poem titled "Oh, Death to Nancy."
Oh, how obvious.
I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later. Like I said, at this point, they went public with the letters, so police then went public saying, "We have a serial killer in Wichita. Lock your doors, stay inside, and check your phones for a dial before entering your home," because part of his MO was cutting the phone lines after getting scared at Shirley Vian's. Smart on the police, tell people that.
Yeah.
So after this is when he and Paula had their second child together. In April of 1979, he was ready for his next victim. He had been watching 63-year-old Anna Williams, who had just recently lost her husband. And he waited for her to get home and went through her things while he waited, took souvenirs, and then he left before she returned because, he didn't want to wait on her. 2 months later, Anna receives a package in the mail with the things that he stole from her and the poem, "Oh, Anna, why didn't you appear?" No, because I would be fucking terrified for my life.
I'd move. Well, I'd leave everywhere. I wouldn't even pack a bag.
Finding out that someone tried to kill you 2 months ago, was in your house and your belongings, and is literally still thinking about you, and has probably been watching you for however long, and all this time you had no idea. She ended up moving away. And then KAKE TV received a package as well, and it contained similar items and another letter. So the letter that KAKE TV received was the poem, "Oh, Anna, why didn't you appear?" In July, a female postal worker opened the door of her apartment at 4 a.m., and there was a man standing there, and he said, "Put this in the KAKE TV mailbox." And he handed her an envelope, and she wasn't really thinking much about it, which why? Why is a random man at your, how does he know that you work for what? Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Later, she describes him as being 30 years old, 5'9", white, wearing a blue jean jacket, jeans, gloves. In June, reminding you, in June in the South. He was clean shaven with hair cropped short above his ears, had a gap between his front teeth. It's never confirmed that was him, but I think we're safe to assume that it was. This is where his second cooling off period starts. This one lasting for 8 years.
What?
I will get to 1985 or whenever. I will get to that time in a second. But I want to talk about 1984 first.
Let's hear it.
In 1984, new technology allowed for investigators to figure out where the B.T.K. likely lived. So all of the murders that he committed so far were within 3.5 miles from one another. So they believed that he lived close by because he was comfortable enough with the areas to walk around freely and spend lengthy periods of time with his victims. So they created a list of white men who lived within a 1/4 mile of each house. And they also found that the poem he based his poem about Shirley off of was recently in a puzzle magazine. So they pulled a list of men who subscribed to that magazine. The targeting capabilities. They're so good.
Yes.
So they found that the poem he wrote for Nancy was based off of a poem titled "Oh Death," which was from a textbook at Wichita State. So they then pulled a list of every male student that took that class that read that poem. So we're starting to get a bit of a profile together here. White man, possible student at WSU, either currently or in the past. Murders in the day. So if he's a student, probably taking classes at night. His MO is strangling his victims after cutting the phone lines and binding them. Take souvenirs. So they had a list of 225 men. Many of them had moved away at this point, but they still set out to get DNA samples, and there were only like 5 men who refused to cooperate. 7 others were unable to be eliminated, and by 1987, they claimed to have narrowed their list down quite a bit. There was a letter sent to the police in 1988, but it was never verified to be his. So that's what the police were doing during this time. We're going to go back to 1985. Dennis had been super active with his church. He was a Cub Scout leader because his son was old enough to be a Cub Scout now. He was 40 years old and he was done cooling off. 53-year-old Maureen Hedge had lived on the same block as Dennis for over 30 years. She was a recent widow and she was described as kind and gentle. On April 27th, he was on a Cub Scout camping trip, and he told everyone there that he had a headache and he was just going to drive into town and get some meds. So he went and he got his car, which was parked by a bowling alley. He went inside, he bought a beer, and purposely spilled it all over his shirt so that people driving around would think that he was drunk. So he called a cab and pretended to be drunk. And he asked the driver to drop him off at a park so that he could walk it off. The park just so happened to be connected to Maureen Hedge's house. So he's just trying to establish a little alibi. So he cuts the phone line, goes in through the back door. She wasn't home, so he waited for her to come back. She comes back with a man. Didn't see that one coming, did you, Denny? So he hides in the closet until this guy leaves at 1 a.m. What if he didn't leave? What if he spent the night? I guess after Kevin Bright, that whole incident, he didn't want to risk men being in the houses. So after she fell asleep, he opened the closet door, literally jumped on top of her, and just strangled her to death.
Oh my God.
So this is going to get interesting. He then dragged her body. He then dragged her body to the trunk of her car, and he drove her car to his church, which he had the keys to because he was main members or whatever. And he covered the windows in black plastic so that no one could see inside. And he took her body and took it into the church. Huge switch up in MO. You have to be out of your mind.
Yeah.
He dragged her body into the basement. He took a bunch of photos of her body in different positions. Taking photos is also a form of a souvenir. Just want to point that out. But he put her back in his trunk and he dumped her body in a ditch on the side of the road along with the stockings that he used to murder her. Surprisingly, a smart move to move her body, because leaving her tied up there would have easily narrowed down the police's list of men, because it was in the church. Obviously, this is B.T.K. because it has all his signatures and everything. Since her body is just being found in a random ditch, they don't really connect it. He called leaving her in the ditch Project Cookie. I don't know. He's so weird. But let's not forget, he's still on a Cub Scout camping trip with his son and other dads and his son's friends. So he had to get back.
I did forget.
So he drove her car back to her house, and then he went to his car that was at the bowling alley and drove back to the campsite. And no one even connected him to this murder until over 20 years later, which makes sense, though. Yeah, her body wasn't in her home, so why the hell would it be him? In September of 1986, he'd chosen his next victim. He showed up to, I think it's pronounced Uyghur. Don't leave us a bad review if it's not. I'm not an expert on the English language. I'm sorry. I don't even think that's English. Definitely not. But
it wasn't our major.
He showed up to her house the morning of September 16th and pretended to be a phone repair guy. So she allowed him to enter her home to check the phone lines. And he stood there and was like pretending to like mess with it for a few minutes. And then he proceeded to tell her his plan to tie her up. So he forced her to the bedroom at gunpoint and attempted to tie her up, but she was defending herself. He ended up overpowering her anyway, tied her with rope, and strangled her with stockings. I do want to point out the items that he's strangling these women with are definitely significant because he literally has rope. He could be strangling them with that. But instead, he goes out of his way to use the women's own stockings, just adding like a more hedonistic element to this already gruesome MO that he has. He's just an asshole. So he took photos of Vicky's body just like he did with Marines in the church. I guess he has like a new favorite souvenir. So he then dipped and drove away in Vicky's car, and Vicky's husband literally got home right after and saw her car pass him by. He just like assumed it was her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so Dennis drove Vicky's car around for a bit, disposed of the evidence, and then he left it like a few blocks away from their home. And he walked to his own car, changed his clothes, and just got away with no one detecting him at all. And because he'd been dormant for 8 years, the cops didn't even consider that this was the BTK, which is stupid because it clearly was him. It had all of his signatures.
Exactly.
But instead, her husband, Bill, was the prime suspect for 18 years.
Oh, I feel bad.
He was never like arrested or charged with anything, but he was the one and only suspect. He ended up suing Dennis as well.
Yeah, as he should.
January of 1991 would take the life of Dennis's 10th victim, 62-year-old Dolores Davis, a widow who lived about 1.5 miles from him. If you haven't noticed, his victims have been getting older. He knew that the older they were, the more likely they would be a widow. So there wouldn't be a man there who would pull a Kevin Bright on him. He was so stupid, but when it came to this shit, he was so smart. So once again, he planned to leave another Cub Scout camping trip for this murder that he'd been planning. He left the trip and he ended up driving back to his parents' home who were out of town. And he changed out of his uniform, drove to the church, parked his car there, and then started walking towards Dolores's home. When he got there, she was just in bed reading, and he waited for her to fall asleep before using a cement block to open the sliding glass door in the back of her house. And I find it very interesting that he went from confidently like just walking in on these women like awake during the day, threatening them, tying them up, whatever, to now he's waiting for them to be asleep, slowly devolving. If he kept going for a while after this, he would like make the switch from organized to disorganized and unravel, but we'll see what happens. So obviously Dolores fucking hears that there's a cement brick going through her glass door. So she goes downstairs and she's like, okay, what the hell was that? Ma'am, I would not do that. Why would you go downstairs? This is like every horror movie ever.
Literally. So
he pulled out one of his old tricks where he said he needed food and money and whatnot and told her he had to tie her up. Tied her up in the bedroom. Crime scene evidence shows that a struggle occurred. She told Dennis that someone was going to be coming over very soon, so he sped the process up and just immediately strangled her. Then he sketched her. Some sources say he did it right there. Some sources say like when he left he did it. Either way, what? Yeah, he drew her. He's an artist all of a sudden. He dragged her body out to her car, put it in the trunk. This time he tossed her under a bridge and then took her car back home. Before doing this, though, he left her under a tree and he, like, went back to her house, cleaned up the fingerprints and whatnot before he, like, put her under the bridge. How did he not get caught with half of these things? I don't understand.
I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah, he walked back to his car like nothing ever happened, went back to his little Cub Scout outing, and that would be his final cooling off period, where he would be dormant for 15 years until 2004. And that is where we're going to stop with part 1.
Why do you do it? Why do you do it to me?
I really hope you guys like it, because I really hope you'll listen to part 2, even though they're both being released on the same day.
You still gotta listen to part 2 to know what the heck happens after 15 years.
You have to know, because it's not over.
And you haven't even mentioned, like, one of the only things I know about this guy.
So you guys better follow us on Instagram, follow us on Spotify, subscribe on Apple Music, like we're fucking recording artists.
We are.
Apple Podcasts, and thank you so much for listening.
And we will hopefully catch you in part 2.